Y'all, I need to tell you something that's been eating me alive for months now. My name's Sarah, and what I'm about to share with you, well, let's just say it completely flipped my world upside down. You know how they say blood is thicker than water? Yeah, well, sometimes that blood can poison everything you thought you knew about your family. It all started on a regular Tuesday night in March. Nothing special about it, just another family dinner at Romano's, this fancy Italian place in downtown Portland that my family had been going to since I was like 12 years old. You know the type of place. Dim lighting, red checkered tablecloths, and waiters who actually remember your usual order. Mom had called that morning, all sweet and cheerful, asking if I wanted to join her, Dad, and my sister Madison for dinner. "Just family time, honey," she'd said. I should have known something was up. Mom never just called for family time anymore. Not since I'd graduated college and moved into my own apartment across town. But hey, I was feeling nostalgic, and honestly, I missed the days when we actually functioned like a normal family. So there I was, sitting in our usual booth, the one by the window where you can see the street performers on the corner, wearing my favorite black dress that always made me feel confident. Dad was going on about his latest golf game. Mom was fussing over the breadsticks like she always does. And Madison was being Madison. You know, perfectly put together, designer everything, looking like she just stepped out of a magazine. The conversation was typical family stuff. Work, weather, Mom's book club drama. I was actually starting to relax, thinking maybe this was just what it seemed. A nice family dinner with no ulterior motives. God, was I naive? Then Madison ordered another bottle of wine, her third glass, if anyone was counting, which I was, because my sister has this habit of getting a little too honest when she drinks. And by honest, I mean brutal. "So, Sarah," she said, swirling her Pinot Grigio like she was some kind of wine expert, "how's that little marketing job of yours going?" Little marketing job. Right. I'd been promoted to senior marketing manager just 6 months ago. But sure, Madison, let's call it little. "It's going great, actually," I replied, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "We just landed the Henderson Group account. It's pretty huge for the agency." Dad looked proud, genuinely proud, and that made my heart warm a little. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I always knew you had it in you." But Madison just smiled this weird, cold smile that I'd never seen before. Mom was suddenly very interested in her chicken parmesan, avoiding eye contact like her life depended on it. "What?" I asked, because the tension at our table had just gone from 0 to 100 real quick. Madison leaned back in her chair, still wearing that creepy smile. "Oh, nothing. It's just, well, it's cute how you still try so hard to impress us." The words hit me like a slap. "Excuse me? Madison, please." Mom finally spoke up, but her voice was weak, like she was asking her to stop telling the truth rather than stop being mean. But my sister was on a roll now. The wine had loosened her tongue, and apparently, years of resentment were about to come spilling out. "Come on, Sarah. Don't look at me like that. We're all adults here." She took another sip of her wine and looked me dead in the eye. "You were never really part of us." The restaurant suddenly felt dead silent, even though I'm sure the other diners were still talking. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears and the sound of my own heartbeat. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" I managed to whisper. But deep down, I think I already knew. I think I'd always known. And that's when my whole world came crashing down. Hey guys, if this story grabbed your attention, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to follow for the next chapter. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. This family dinner is about to get a whole lot more dramatic. You guys, I'm still shaking as I write this. What happened next at that dinner table? I don't think I'll ever fully recover from it, but I need to tell you everything, because what came out of Madison's mouth that night changed everything I thought I knew about my life. So there I was, staring at my sister like she'd just grown a second head, waiting for someone, anyone, to tell me this was all some sick joke. Dad had gone completely pale, and Mom looked like she was about to throw up right there on the red checkered tablecloth. "Madison, stop," Dad finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But it was too late. The cat was out of the bag, and my sister was drunk enough not to care about the consequences. "No, Dad. She deserves to know the truth." Madison leaned forward, her eyes cold and calculating. "Sarah, you're adopted. Have been since you were 2 years old. Mom and Dad never told you because they thought it would be too traumatic or whatever. The world literally stopped spinning. I'm not being dramatic here. Everything just froze. The sounds of the restaurant, the clinking of silverware, even my own breathing seemed to pause. That can't be, I stammered, looking desperately at my parents for some kind of denial, some sign that Madison was just being cruel. But Mom's tears told me everything I needed to know. Sweetheart, Mom finally spoke, reaching across the table for my hand, but I pulled back like her touch would burn me. We wanted to tell you so many times, but you were just so happy, so well-adjusted. Well-adjusted, I practically shouted, causing other diners to turn and stare. You let me live a lie for 25 years and you call that well-adjusted? Dad cleared his throat, trying to regain some control. Sarah, please, let us explain. Your biological parents, they died in a car accident. You came to us through the state, and from the moment we saw you— Oh, cut the crap, Dad, Madison interrupted, finishing her wine in one gulp. Tell her the real reason you never said anything. Tell her about the money. Money? What money? I felt like I was drowning in confusion and betrayal. Madison, that's enough, Mom snapped, but the damage was already done. My sister smiled that twisted smile again. Your biological parents were loaded, Sarah. Like, seriously rich. When they died, they left everything to you in a trust fund that you can't access until you're 30. Mom and Dad have been the trustees this whole time, managing your best interests. The pieces started clicking together in my head like a horrifying puzzle. How much money are we talking about? $3.2 million, Dad said quietly, unable to meet my eyes. I thought I might actually pass out right there. $3 million. My biological parents, who I'd never known existed, had left me $3 million, and my adoptive parents had hidden it from me for over 2 decades. So that's why you kept me around, I said, my voice eerily calm. Not because you loved me or wanted me, because you were getting paid to take care of me. That's not true, Mom started, but I held up my hand. No. I need to know everything. Right now. Who were my real parents? Where did I come from? What else have you been hiding from me? Madison looked like she was enjoying every second of this. Their names were Victoria and James Henley. They owned half the tech companies in Seattle before they died. And get this, they didn't just die in any car accident. They were on their way to see you when it happened. Apparently, they'd been trying to get you back. My world tilted on its axis again. Get me back? What do you mean, get me back? The silence at our table was deafening. Finally, Mom spoke in a voice so small I could barely hear her. The adoption, it wasn't exactly legal, Sarah. Your parents never consented. They were young and going through a rough patch, and your father's business partner convinced them to let him take care of you temporarily, while they sorted things out. But that man, he sold you to us through a black market adoption ring. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward and crashed to the floor. Every eye in Romano's was on us now, but I didn't care. I felt like I was going to be sick. You bought me, I whispered. You literally bought me from kidnappers. Sarah, please, it wasn't like that. But I was already walking away. I threw my napkin on the table, grabbed my purse, and headed straight for the exit. Behind me I could hear Mom crying and Dad calling my name, but I couldn't deal with any of it. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to figure out how my entire life had been a complete and total lie. As I reached the door, I heard Madison call out one last thing. The best part? Your trust fund money? They've been using it to pay for my college, my car, and my apartment this whole time. Thanks for the free ride, sis. And that's when I knew I wasn't just going to walk away from this family. I was going to make them pay. Okay, guys, I know you're probably as shocked as I was. I mean, who expects to find out at a random Tuesday dinner that their entire life is a lie, right? But trust me, it gets so much worse. I spent the next 3 days locked in my apartment, living on takeout Chinese food and righteous anger. I called in sick to work, which was only half a lie because I felt sick to my stomach every time I thought about what my so-called family had done to me. But by Friday, the shock had worn off, and the rage had crystallized into something much more dangerous. Determination. I was going to find out everything. Every single detail about my real parents, about the illegal adoption, about where my money had gone, and about what other lies my family had been telling me. And then I was going to make them wish they'd never messed with me. My first stop was the Portland Public Library downtown. I know, seems old school, right? But sometimes the best information isn't on Google. I spent hours digging through newspaper archives from 1999, looking for any mention of Victoria and James Henley, And boy, did I hit the jackpot. The Henleys weren't just rich, they were Portland royalty. James had founded 3 different tech startups before he was 30, and Victoria came from old money, like her family had been funding half the city since the 1800s. They were philanthropists, had donated millions to children's charities, and were apparently madly in love. The articles about their deaths were heartbreaking. They'd been driving to meet with a lawyer about getting me back when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit them head-on. They died instantly, but here's the kicker. The lawyer they were going to see was about to file criminal charges against the adoption ring that had taken me. My real parents had been fighting to get me back, and they died trying. I was crying so hard in the library that the librarian brought me a box of tissues and asked if I was okay. How do you even begin to answer that question? But the newspaper articles were just the beginning. I started making phone calls, tracking down anyone who might have known my biological parents, their old friends, business associates, anyone who might be able to fill in the blanks. That's how I met Patricia Williams. Patricia had been Victoria's best friend since college, and when I called her out of the blue and explained who I was, she literally gasped and started crying on the phone. "Oh my God, Sarah," she whispered. "We've been looking for you for 25 years. We?" Turns out, Patricia and a few other close friends of my parents had never believed the official story about what happened to me after the accident. They'd hired private investigators, worked with lawyers, even offered rewards for information. But every lead had gone cold. Patricia agreed to meet me that same day at a coffee shop in the Pearl District. She was this elegant woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a warm smile that reminded me so much of the woman in the old photos I'd found online. My real mother. "You look just like her," Patricia said the moment she saw me. "Victoria would have been so proud of the woman you've become." She pulled out an old photo album and showed me pictures I'd never seen. My parents holding me as a baby, playing with me in a park, teaching me to walk. I was their whole world. You could see it in every single picture. "They never wanted to give you up," Patricia explained. "James was having some business troubles. Nothing serious, just a cash flow issue with one of his startups. His business partner, Richard Morse, convinced them that they should let his sister and her husband take care of you temporarily, just until things stabilized. It was supposed to be for a few weeks, maybe a month, but they never gave me back." "No. And when James and Victoria tried to get you back, they discovered that Richard had forged documents, taken money from other desperate couples, and essentially sold children through a fake adoption agency. Your parents were about to expose the whole operation when they died." Patricia nodded, wiping away tears. "The worst part is, we're pretty sure the drunk driver that killed them wasn't really drunk. The police investigation was sloppy, evidence disappeared, and Richard Morse suddenly left town right after the accident." My blood turned to ice. "Are you saying someone murdered my parents?" "I'm saying there were a lot of suspicious circumstances that never got properly investigated, and a lot of powerful people who had reasons to want James and Victoria to stop digging. I felt like I was in some kind of twisted movie. Not only had my adoptive parents stolen me and my inheritance, but my real parents might have been murdered to keep them quiet about it." "Patricia," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my head, "I need to know everything, every detail, every name, every piece of evidence you have." She smiled sadly. "I was hoping you'd say that. Because, honey, there's something else you need to know about your trust fund." My heart sank. "What about it?" "It's not $3 million anymore, Sarah. With investments and interest over the years, you're worth about $12 million now. And according to the original terms of the trust, you don't have to wait until you're 30. You can claim it any time after your 25th birthday. I had turned 25 3 months ago. Your adoptive parents have been lying about that too," Patricia continued. "They've been stealing from you for years, and they've been breaking federal law by keeping you from your inheritance. That's when I realized this wasn't just about family drama anymore. This was about justice. This was about making sure the people who destroyed my family, all of them, paid for what they'd done. And I was about to become very, very rich in the process. Time for the Monroe family to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong person. Y'all, I'm about to blow your minds with what I discovered next. After my meeting with Patricia, I was like a woman possessed. I had names, I had dates, I had a paper trail that went back 25 years, and most importantly, I had a burning desire for justice that was keeping me up at night. First thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I found Elizabeth Chen, this badass attorney who specialized in trust fund fraud and illegal adoptions. She had a reputation for taking down corrupt families, and she didn't mess around. "Sarah," she said after reviewing all the documents Patricia had given me, This is one of the most clear-cut cases of fraud I've ever seen. Not only can we get your money back, but we can probably send your adoptive parents to prison. Prison. The word should have scared me, but instead, it felt like justice. Elizabeth and I spent the next week building an airtight case. We tracked down bank records showing exactly how much money Robert and Linda Monroe, yeah, those are my adoptive parents' names, had stolen from my trust fund over the years. Madison's college tuition at Stanford, paid for with my money. Her brand new BMW, mine. The down payment on their house in the fancy part of Portland, all mine. They'd stolen almost $800,000 from me over the years, and that was just what we could prove. But the real breakthrough came when Elizabeth's investigator tracked down Richard Morse, the man who'd orchestrated the whole illegal adoption ring. Turns out he'd been living under a fake name in Florida for the past 2 decades, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd kept records. Not just any records. Detailed files on every child he'd trafficked, every payment he'd received, and every family he'd destroyed, including mine. Your adoptive parents didn't just stumble into an illegal adoption, Elizabeth explained during one of our meetings. They specifically sought out Richard Morse because they wanted a child from a wealthy family. They knew about your trust fund from the beginning, and they planned to use it for their own benefit. My hands were literally shaking as she showed me copies of emails between Robert Monroe and Richard Morse, discussing my market value and negotiating the price for my adoption. They talked about me like I was a commodity, a business transaction. One email from Robert to Richard was particularly disgusting. "We'll take the Henley girl, but only if we can access the trust fund immediately. We're not interested in charity work." Charity work. That's what they called raising me. But the worst part? Madison knew. She'd known the whole time. Elizabeth had found emails from when Madison was 16, asking her parents when she could get her share of my money for college. She'd been in on the whole scheme, just waiting for her cut. "I want to confront them," I told Elizabeth. "I want to see their faces when they realize their whole world is about to come crashing down." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure that's wise? We could just serve them with papers and let the legal system handle it." "No," I said firmly. "They destroyed my family, stole my inheritance, and lied to me for 25 years. I want them to know that I know everything before the police show up at their door." So we planned it out. Elizabeth would file all the legal paperwork on a Friday afternoon, which meant the Monroes would likely be arrested Monday morning. That gave me the weekend to have one final family dinner with them. I called Linda on Thursday and asked if we could all get together for dinner Sunday night. I told her I'd had time to think about what Madison had said, and I wanted to work things out as a family. Linda was so relieved she nearly cried on the phone. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so glad you called. We've all been so worried about you. Of course we'll have dinner. Should we go back to Romano's?" "Actually," I said, "why don't I cook? I'll come to your house Sunday at 6. I'll make that lasagna you always said you loved." "That sounds perfect, sweetheart. I'll make sure your father and Madison are there." Perfect, indeed. I spent Saturday shopping for ingredients, and Sunday afternoon cooking the most elaborate meal I'd ever made. Homemade lasagna, garlic bread, Caesar salad, the works. I wanted this to be a dinner they'd never forget. But before I went to their house, I made one more stop. Patricia had given me a key to a storage unit where she'd kept all of my biological parents' belongings, things she'd rescued from their house before it was sold. Photo albums, home videos, my baby clothes, toys they'd bought me. I found exactly what I was looking for. A small silver necklace that had belonged to my real mother, with a heart-shaped locket that contained pictures of her and my father. Patricia had told me Victoria was wearing it when she died. I put it on and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in my life, I felt like I knew who I really was. I was Victoria and James Henley's daughter. I was worth $12 million. And I was about to take down the people who'd stolen everything from me. When I knocked on the Monroes' door that Sunday evening, carrying my homemade lasagna and wearing my mother's necklace, I was ready for war. "Sarah!" Linda opened the door with the biggest fake smile I'd ever seen. "Come in, sweetheart. Everything smells amazing." As I walked into that house, the house that had been bought with my money, I couldn't help but smile. They had no idea what was coming. Guys, if you thought the first family dinner was dramatic, you ain't seen nothing yet. Walking into that house, knowing everything I knew, felt like being an undercover agent in enemy territory. Every family photo on the walls, every piece of furniture, every damn thing in that place had been bought with my stolen inheritance. "Sarah, honey, you look wonderful." Robert said, giving me one of his awkward dad hugs. "We've missed you so much this week." Missed me? Right. They'd missed their cash cow. Madison was already sitting at the dining room table, scrolling through her phone like the spoiled princess she'd always been. She looked up when I walked in, and for just a second, I saw something that might have been guilt flash across her face. "Hey," she said quietly. "Thanks for coming. I was worried you might never speak to us again." "Family is family," I replied sweetly, setting the lasagna on the table. "Besides, there's so much we still need to talk about." Linda was bustling around the kitchen, clearly nervous. "I made your favorite dessert," she called out. "That chocolate cake with the raspberry filling." My favorite dessert. Except it had never actually been my favorite. I'd just been polite about it for years because I thought that's what good daughters did. But Victoria Henley's favorite dessert? According to Patricia, it was lemon bars. Apparently, I'd inherited my real mother's sweet tooth. We sat down to eat, and for the first 20 minutes everything was painfully normal. Robert talked about work. Linda gossiped about the neighbors. Madison complained about her job at the marketing firm, the job she'd gotten through connections Robert had made with my money. But I could see the tension underneath it all. They kept glancing at each other when they thought I wasn't looking, having entire conversations with their eyes. They knew they'd screwed up at Romano's, and they were trying to figure out how much damage control they needed to do. Finally, I decided to start stirring the pot. "So," I said, taking a sip of wine, "I've been doing some research this week about my biological parents." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Linda's fork clattered against her plate. "Sarah," Robert said carefully, "we know you're upset, and we understand why, but some things are better left in the past." "Are they?" I asked innocently, because I found out some really interesting stuff, like how Victoria and James Henley were worth way more than you told me, and how they were actually trying to get me back when they died. Madison shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Sarah, maybe we should talk about this later." "No, I think now is perfect." I reached into my purse and pulled out copies of some of the documents Elizabeth had found. "See, I hired this amazing lawyer this week. Elizabeth Chen. You might have heard of her. She specializes in trust fund fraud." The blood drained from Robert's face so fast I thought he might pass out right there at the dinner table. "I know about Richard Morse," I continued, my voice still sweet as pie. "I know about the illegal adoption ring. I know about the forged documents. And I know about every single penny you've stolen from my trust fund over the past 25 years. Linda started crying. Not the pretty kind of crying either. The ugly, desperate kind that comes when your whole world is about to collapse. "Sarah, please," she whispered. "Let us explain. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Oh, I'd love to hear your explanation," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Please, tell me how you accidentally bought a stolen child, and then accidentally spent her inheritance for decades." Robert found his voice, but it came out as a croak. "How much do you know?" I smiled. "Everything. I know you specifically requested a child from a wealthy family. I know you negotiated my price like I was a used car. I know you've been stealing from my trust fund since the day you got me. And I know that all three of you have been in on it from the beginning." Madison slammed her hand on the table. "That's not fair. I was just a kid when they adopted you." "Really?" I pulled out another document. "Because I have emails from when you were 16, asking when you could get your share of my money for college. Seems like you understood the situation just fine." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear their hearts pounding as they realized how completely screwed they were. "What do you want?" Robert finally asked. "Money? We can pay you back." "With what money, Dad?" I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. "You've spent almost everything. The house, Madison's car, her college tuition, your fancy vacations. Where exactly are you going to get $800,000 plus interest?" Linda was hyperventilating now. "Sarah, please. We love you. We raised you. We're your family." "No," I said, standing up from the table. "Victoria and James Henley were my family. You're just the people who bought me." I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a family photo from last Christmas. All of us smiling, looking like the perfect American family. It made me sick. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm and controlled. "Tomorrow morning the FBI is going to arrest all three of you for conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. You're going to prison. Your assets are going to be seized to pay back what you stole from me. And I'm going to take control of my $12 million inheritance that you've been keeping from me." "$12 million?" Madison gasped. "Oh, you didn't know?" "Yeah, Turns out when you invest $3 million properly over 25 years instead of stealing from it, it grows. A lot. Robert tried one last desperate play. Sarah, we can work this out. We can go to court, work out a payment plan. Robert, I said, using his first name for the first time in my life, I don't want your money back in installments. I want you destroyed, just like you destroyed my real family. I headed toward the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and the lasagna. It's poisoned. Their faces went white with terror before I laughed. Just kidding. But the look on your faces was totally worth it. As I walked out of that house for the last time, I heard Linda sobbing and Robert shouting my name, but I didn't look back. 25 years of lies were about to catch up with them, and I was going to be there to watch it all burn down. Justice was finally coming for the Henley family. Holy crap, you guys. Monday morning was like Christmas, my birthday, and the 4th of July all rolled into one beautiful, chaotic package. I woke up at 6 a.m., didn't even need an alarm because I'd barely slept all night. Today was the day the Monroe family was going to pay for what they'd done to me. Elizabeth had timed everything perfectly. The FBI raid was scheduled for 7 a.m., which meant I had just enough time to grab coffee and position myself across the street from their house to watch the show. I know. Some of you might think that makes me petty or vindictive, but after 25 years of being lied to and manipulated, I figured I'd earned the right to see justice served with my own 2 eyes. I parked my car at the Starbucks on the corner and ordered the biggest coffee they had. The barista, this kid who couldn't have been more than 19, asked if I was okay, because my hands were shaking. Just excited about something happening at work today, I told him, which wasn't technically a lie. By 6:45, I was sitting on a bench in the park across from the Monroe house, pretending to read the newspaper while keeping my eyes glued to their front door. At exactly 7 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. Watching FBI agents storm the house where you grew up is surreal, let me tell you. I'd seen it in movies and TV shows, but seeing it happen in real life, to people I'd called family for most of my life, it was intense. Robert answered the door in his bathrobe, coffee mug still in his hand. I could see his face go from confused to terrified in about 2 seconds, as the agents flashed their badges and pushed past him into the house. Linda came running down the stairs in her nightgown, and I swear I could hear her screaming from across the street. Madison's bedroom window was on the 2nd floor, and I watched as agents entered her room and emerged a few minutes later with her in handcuffs, still wearing her pajamas. The whole thing took maybe 20 minutes. They loaded all 3 of them into separate vehicles. Standard procedure to prevent them from coordinating their stories, Elizabeth had explained. As the SUVs drove away, neighbors started coming out of their houses, phones in hand, recording everything for social media. I felt empty, not satisfied or vindicated like I thought I would, just empty. My phone buzzed. Text message from Elizabeth. Phase 1 complete. Are you ready for Phase 2? Phase 2 was claiming my inheritance. The trust documents were already filed with the court, and thanks to the evidence we'd gathered about the Monroe family's fraud, there was no legal barrier to me accessing my money immediately. $12,400,000. That was the exact amount, including interest and investment growth over the years. Patricia had been conservative in her estimate. I drove downtown to the bank where my trust account had been held all these years. Walking into that sterile marble lobby, wearing my mother's necklace and carrying documents that proved who I really was, felt like stepping into a new life. The bank manager, Mr. Harrison, was this older gentleman who'd apparently been managing trust accounts for 30 years. When Elizabeth and I walked into his office, he looked genuinely emotional. "Ms. Henley," he said, using my real last name for the first time in my life. "I knew your parents personally. They were extraordinary people, and they loved you very much." He showed me documents my biological parents had left with the trust, letters they'd written to me, photos, even videos they'd recorded for my future birthdays. There was so much I'd never known about them, so much love that had been stolen from me. "Your father wanted you to know that he was proud of you no matter what path you chose in life," Mr. Harrison said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written in James Henley's handwriting. "And your mother, she wanted you to have this." Inside the envelope was a letter from Victoria, along with the deed to a property I'd never heard of. Apparently, my biological parents had bought land in the mountains outside Portland, planning to build a house where they could raise me away from the city. After they died, Patricia had maintained the property, hoping someday I'd want to see it. But the letter, God, the letter destroyed me. Victoria had written it when I was just a baby, but somehow she'd known she might not be around to say these things to me in person. "My dearest Sarah," it began, "if you're reading this, it means something has happened to your father and me. I want you to know that every moment we had with you was the greatest gift of our lives. You were wanted, you were cherished, and you were loved beyond measure." I was ugly crying in that bank office, and I didn't care who saw me. By the time we finished all the paperwork, it was late afternoon, and I was officially one of the wealthiest women in Portland. But more than that, I finally knew who I really was. Sarah Victoria Henley, daughter of James and Victoria Henley. Survivor, fighter. That evening, I drove out to the property my parents had bought for me. It was this beautiful piece of land overlooking the Columbia River, with old-growth trees and a view that went on for miles. Patricia was waiting for me there, along with several other friends of my parents who'd driven out to meet me. "Welcome home, Sarah," Patricia said, giving me a hug that felt more motherly than any I'd ever received from Linda Monroe. As we stood there watching the sunset over the river, I realized something important. Getting my money back and seeing the Monroe family arrested wasn't really about revenge. It was about reclaiming my identity, honoring my real parents' memory, and finally understanding where I came from. But that didn't mean I was done with the Monroe family. Not by a long shot. There was still one more surprise I had planned for them, and it was going to be the sweetest revenge of all. Okay, guys, this is where things get really good. Having $12 million is nice and all, but you know what's even better? Using that money to completely destroy the people who wronged you in the most poetic way possible. The Monroe family thought their worst nightmare was getting arrested. They had no idea what I had planned next. See, while they were sitting in jail waiting for their bail hearings, I was busy buying up their entire lives. And when you have $12 million and a team of lawyers who don't mess around, you can move pretty fast. First, I bought the mortgage on their house. Yeah, you heard that right. The same house they'd purchased with my stolen inheritance was now mine. The bank was more than happy to sell the mortgage to me, especially when they learned about the fraud case. Next, I bought out Madison's car loan, her credit card debt, and her student loans. Turns out when you're facing federal charges, financial institutions get real nervous about your ability to pay them back. But the piece de resistance? Robert worked for Morrison & Associates, this mid-sized consulting firm downtown. Guess who just became their biggest client? That's right. I hired Morrison & Associates to help me invest my newfound wealth in Portland real estate. And as their new biggest client, I had some very specific requests about which employees I wanted handling my account. "I'm sorry, Ms. Henley," Robert's boss said during our meeting on Wednesday, "but Robert Monroe is currently unavailable due to legal issues. Perhaps one of our other senior consultants could assist you." "Actually," I said, sliding a folder across his desk, "I'm specifically requesting that Mr. Monroe be removed from all client accounts and terminated immediately. I have concerns about his ethical standards." Inside the folder were copies of all the evidence we'd gathered about Robert's fraud. His boss's face went through about 15 different emotions as he read through it. "This will be handled immediately," he assured me. By Thursday, all 3 of the Monroe family members had been fired from their jobs. By Friday, they were being evicted from their house. And by the following Monday, every credit card company and loan provider in the state had been notified about their criminal charges. I know what you're thinking. Isn't this a little extreme? Maybe. But here's the thing. They didn't just steal my money. They stole my entire identity, my relationship with my real parents, and 25 years of my life. As far as I was concerned, I was just getting started. The best part came when Elizabeth called me with news about their plea negotiations. "They want to make a deal," she said, barely containing her laughter. "Robert's lawyer thinks they can work out some kind of restitution agreement that would keep them out of federal prison." "And what exactly are they planning to pay me back with?" I asked. "Last I checked, they were broke and unemployed." That's what I told them. Their lawyer suggested they might be able to mortgage the house for the money. I couldn't help but laugh. "What house? I own their mortgage now. They're getting evicted tomorrow." "You what?" Elizabeth sounded impressed and slightly terrified. "Sarah, what exactly have you been up to?" "Just making sure they understand the consequences of their actions. Did you know Madison has been texting me all week, begging me to work something out as a family? She actually had the nerve to suggest I could just give them some of my money, and we could all move on. Please tell me you're not responding to those texts." "Oh, I'm responding. I've been sending her photos of everything I buy with my inheritance. New car, new apartment, designer clothes, expensive dinners. I want her to see exactly what kind of life she could have had if she hadn't helped steal from me. The truth was, I wasn't actually spending money on frivolous stuff. Most of my inheritance was going into investments and charitable foundations, things my biological parents would have been proud of. But Madison didn't need to know that. By the end of the second week, the Monroe family situation had gone from bad to apocalyptic. They were living in a cheap motel, working minimum wage jobs, the only places that would hire them with pending federal charges, and facing the very real possibility of spending the next 10 to 15 years in prison. That's when Linda called me. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "please, I'm begging you. I know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but could we just talk? Face to face?" Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me wanted to tell her to rot in hell. But there was another part of me, the part that was tired of carrying around all this anger, that was curious about what she could possibly have to say. "Fine," I said. "One conversation. But it's happening in public, and you get 30 minutes. We met at the same Romano's where this whole nightmare had started. Linda looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Her hair was greasy, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had the hollow look of someone who'd lost everything. "You look good," she said when I sat down across from her. "Happy?" "I am happy," I replied honestly. "For the first time in my life, I know who I really am. Sarah, I need you to know that we did love you. Maybe not in the right way, maybe not for the right reasons, but in our own messed up way, we did care about you." "Linda," I said gently, "you bought me from child traffickers and then spent my inheritance like it was your personal piggy bank. That's not love, that's ownership." She started crying then, the kind of broken sobs that come from someone who knows they've lost everything, and it's entirely their own fault. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Do you want me to forgive you? Pretend the last 25 years didn't happen? Give you money so you can go back to your comfortable life? I want—" She struggled to find the words. "I want to know if there's any part of you that remembers the good times. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, family vacations. Any part of you that remembers being happy with us." And you know what? There was. Buried under all the anger and betrayal, there were good memories. Times when I'd felt loved and safe, even if it was all built on a lie. "There are good memories," I admitted. "But that doesn't change what you did to me, and it doesn't change what you did to my real parents." "I know," she whispered. "I know we can never make it right. But Sarah, we're going to prison. We're going to lose everything. Isn't that enough?" I looked at this woman who'd raised me, who'd read me bedtime stories, and bandaged my scraped knees and taught me how to drive, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not love, not hate, just nothing. "It's not about what's enough, Linda. It's about justice. And justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure this never happens to another family." I stood up to leave, then turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, I hope prison gives you time to think about what you did. Not just to me, but to Victoria and James Henley. They died trying to get their daughter back, and you stole that from them." As I walked out of Romano's for the second and final time, I realized something important. I was done with the Monroe family. The anger, the need for revenge, all of it was just gone. It was time to start living my real life. Here we are, guys. The final chapter of this crazy story, and honestly, it ends better than I ever could have imagined. It's been 6 months since that last conversation with Linda at Romano's, and so much has changed. The Monroe family pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud charges. Robert got 8 years in federal prison, Linda got 6, and Madison got 4 plus 3 years probation. They're paying restitution, though it'll take them decades to even make a dent in what they owe. But here's the thing. I'm not angry anymore. I know that might sound weird after everything I've told you, but somewhere along the way, the anger just left. Maybe it was when I finally stood in the house my real parents had planned to build for me. Or maybe it was when I started using my inheritance the way they would have wanted me to. I kept the marketing job for a few months, but eventually I decided to start my own foundation. The Henley Foundation for Children's Rights focuses on protecting kids from illegal adoptions and human trafficking. We've already helped reunite 12 families and shut down 2 more adoption rings. Patricia has become like a second mother to me. She's on the foundation's board of directors, and she's the one who convinced me to turn my parents' mountain property into a summer camp for kids who've been through the foster system. Camp Henley opens next summer, and I couldn't be more excited about it. I also decided to change my name legally. I'm Sarah Victoria Henley now, and it feels right in a way that Sarah Monroe never did. I wear my mother's necklace every day, And I've had my father's watch restored so I can carry a piece of him with me too. The best part, though? I'm not alone anymore. Turns out, having your real identity and $12 million opens a lot of doors, including the door to finding out you have extended family you never knew about. My biological grandmother, Victoria's mother, is still alive and living in Seattle. Eleanor Henley is 92 years old and sharp as a tack, and when Patricia tracked her down and told her about me, she drove to Portland the very next day to meet me. "You have your mother's eyes," she said the moment she saw me, "and your father's stubborn chin. I also have 2 aunts, 3 uncles, and more cousins than I can count. There's this whole family who's been missing me for 25 years, who has photos of me as a baby, and stories about my parents that no one else could tell me. Last month, we had our first annual Henley family reunion. 43 people showed up, all wanting to meet the granddaughter, niece, and cousin who'd been stolen from them decades ago. I ugly cried through the entire barbecue, but they were happy tears. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become," my Uncle David told me, "and they'd be proud of how you handled getting justice for your family." Justice. That's what it was, in the end. Not revenge, not payback, but justice. The Monroe family is paying for their crimes. The adoption ring that stole me has been exposed and shut down, and other families won't have to go through what mine did. As for me, I'm living the life I was always meant to live. I have a family who loves me for who I really am, work that matters to me, and the resources to make a real difference in the world. I bought a house in the hills outside Portland. Nothing too crazy, but big enough for family gatherings and holidays. I'm even thinking about getting a dog. My real mother loved golden retrievers, according to Patricia. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if Victoria and James hadn't died, if I'd grown up as Sarah Henley instead of Sarah Monroe. But I've realized that wondering about that doesn't help anyone. I can't change the past, but I can honor my real parents' memory by living the kind of life they would have wanted for me. A life full of love, family, and purpose. A life where I know exactly who I am and where I came from. A life that's finally, completely mine. 6 months ago, if someone had told me that finding out my entire life was a lie would end up being the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have thought they were crazy. But sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest discoveries. I discovered who my real family was. I discovered what I was capable of when pushed to my limits. And I discovered that justice, when it finally comes, tastes sweeter than any revenge ever could. The Monroe family thought they could steal my life and get away with it. Instead, they gave me the push I needed to find my real life, the one I was always meant to live. And that life? It's pretty damn amazing. Hey everyone. Thank you so much for following Sarah's incredible journey with me. If this story moved you, inspired you, or just kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from all of you. Don't forget to follow the channel for more stories that will blow your mind. Sometimes the biggest betrayals lead to the most amazing transformations, and Sarah's story proves that justice, truth, and finding your real family can heal even the deepest wounds. Until next time, keep believing that your story, whatever it is, has the power to inspire others. See you in the next one.